Hello everybody, and this is just going to be a short video tutorial on how to flash custom ROMs on the OnePlus 6 device. And it's fairly straightforward. With the AB partitioning schemes, we have two partitions that we need to flash at least our base ROM to. I actually haven't come across a ROM that requires you to flash on both sides, but for now we'll be focusing on basically what you have to do for at least the majority of ROMs. So the first thing you need to do is have the stock firmware or a base firmware, since custom ROMs really don't do all their firmware, or can't, I suppose, to the fullest extent. I'm sure that would take a really long time or whatever. They use at least parts of the base firmware, at least part of the vendor image, so that they can verify that it's this device versus that device or whatever jibber jabber. So basically, what I'm doing right now is I've had to wipe my I had to wipe my ROM because I forgot my pin. And that's my fault for making all these long, complicated pins. So I'm wiping it again, and I figured I'd just take the time out to make a short video on how you're supposed to do it. So when you go to XDA or you go to wherever and they give you flashing instructions, and they say make sure that you have the base firmware installed on both slots. This is exactly what they're talking about. Right now I'm flashing after formatting my data through TWRP and factory resetting again after formatting the data. For some reason that seems to keep TWRP from boot looping. But I just booted back in right after doing all that, and after wiping my system, my data, my cache, my Dalvik, and internal storage, so going for a complete, totally fresh install of the operating system. Quick note, I'm pretty sure that boot loop has something to do with Magisk, so if you are looking to flash any custom ROMs, it may behoove you to uninstall Magisk first before you wipe everything for the clean install. This seems to help with TWRP. On the OnePlus 6, it seems that the only TWRP recovery, or at least the most popular one for allowing you the full functionality of whatever ROM you're installing, seems to be BlueSpark, so I would recommend that at this time. The official one does seem to have issues. I had an issue with enabling signature spoofing, and a couple of other issues with AOSP Extended and OmniROM. That being said, what I just did over there, I was on slot B. You see it says current slot. Well, now it says A, because I changed it over to slot A after flashing it to slot B. And when you flash it to both sides, I'm pretty sure that this OTA update does flash it to both sides, so this is a bit redundant, but I haven't tested it, and quite honestly, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So after that, you're going to want to flash the base firmware, in this case Oxygen OS 9.0.4, hit that add more zips, and make sure that you flash TWRP after Oxygen OS so that you have TWRP after you're done flashing your base firmware. And we'll speed this up. And it normally takes a little while for the install of the OTA packages, and you can, like I said, you can, or I actually forgot to mention, you can get the stock firmware for your device, in this case OnePlus 6, from the manufacturer's website. So I actually downloaded this off of XDA. It makes no difference. XDA is a reliable and trustworthy source for all your firmware. It's most likely where you downloaded your custom firmware from anyway. So let's speed this back up, and when it's all done, I'll show you how I finish up with installing my custom ROMs. It does take a while. Just be patient. About 2 to 5 minutes. Up, there we go. Once you see it's on step 2 of 2, which I'm pretty sure is when it's actually flashing it to the B partition, but whatever, that's no big deal. I'm just going to take a second and explain this term ROM. What is a custom ROM? Custom ROM is kind of a misnomer, since a ROM actually signifies a read-only module. A read-only module is a type of data that can only be read. It can only be installed once, and it can only be read from then on. Usually, only the most like basic types of firmware are read-only modules. So, like kind of like your computer's BIOS or something like that. So the term read-only module is kind of a misnomer. It's really custom firmware. It's someone else who is building upon Android source code, who is providing some sort of customization or feature that you seem to desire over your stock firmware. In this case, my motivation is signature spoofing, and after this video, if you want to go check out about micro G and the installation process for getting rid of Google altogether from Android, then you can head on over to that. That will be immediately succeeding this video. Alright, so now both of those are flashed. Both the stock firmware, as I mentioned, and TWRP are flashed. So we're going to want to reboot back to our recovery. Now you'll notice that when you have stock firmware installed, it will not say something like no OS installed. The no OS installed error, which we will get to in just a second, is a very common error and it scares a lot of people when coming from when moving over to a custom ROM. It means absolutely nothing. Don't worry about it. It's absolutely installed. You just installed it. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to connect my USB cable. Right? I'm going to put the phone aside right now. I'm going to take you on over to my screen. Wow, bright. I'll hold the camera up while I'm doing this. So I have it plugged in. You can see OnePlus. It says A6000. It's not the A6000, but it's the A6003. But I'm going to open up the internal storage. It's the TWRP folder where I put basically all my stuff. I'm going to move two things in there after verifying that both the Oxygen OS firmware is there. I'm going to delete that. It's just wasted space. I don't need it anymore. And I'm going to go back to my Android build folder. I'm going to take OmniROM. Just move that over. Another way that you could port that over to your device, if you're for some reason unable to mount it, I'm going to show you right now real quick. It's in my opinion, it's even easier, but your mileage may vary. So another even easier way to move things over, especially if you're not showing anything in your main directory. For let's say your device doesn't mount the storage, you just ADB devices. It should list TWRP as recovery. You're going to locate your file name over here, and most people would say, oh man, just change the directory, dude. and I'm going to say, I'm not going to do that. Not today. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy over the file path. I'm going to type in adb push, and I'm going to paste the file path. Android build. Then I'm going to look up the file that I want. In this case, I want Magisk. And I'm going to actually just type this in since it's going to be cooler. Magisk /v18.1. This is a zip file, so I have to include that in the file path .zip. And then you need to specify somewhere to send it. In this case, I'm going to send it over to and the file path on the phone says that it is SD card TWRP. So I'm going to type in SD card TWRP. All right. All caps is probably unnecessary, but you never know. So I'm going to hit that. Cannot stat user desktop Android. Really? All right. Then I'm just going to move it over to C, just for the sake of, that's weird. It says there's no such file or directory. Okay, sure. So C, first adb push, and I'm just gonna delete this file path. That's nonsense. And I know I just moved it to the C directory, so this will work. There we go. And if we look over here, just like magic, it should appear in TWRP. And boom, it's there. So, hands free, y'all. Anyways, so to finish this all up, and it is a lengthy process, and you will need to set a little bit of time to do it, but it may very well be worth it. A lot of the custom ROMs that I've gotten to use are surprisingly feature rich, and I'm glad they're there as an alternative to stock firmware. So anyways, back to how to do this. Now we have stock firmware installed on both slots, both slot A and slot B with TWRP, obviously. We are going to advanced wipe. You can factory reset. It makes no difference whatsoever. I probably would just avoid that. A lot of people say you could just factory reset. You want to wipe Dalvik Art Cache. You want to wipe the system. Don't worry, it does not wipe the entire system right away. It takes a reboot to wipe the system. You're going to wipe data. That's it. Keep the vendor partition. Okay, for those of you who don't know what a partition is, maybe I'll make another video for that. So, after you've done that, install your custom ROM of choice. In my case, OmniROM. Add more zips. TWRP. Flash. One grave misconception about the OnePlus or any AB partition devices is that you need to flash the custom ROM to both slots. I have encountered some of the most peculiar errors, to say the least, when doing so. So I absolutely do not recommend that anybody do that. It's not only completely unnecessary, but yeah, it can be detrimental to the system. The other partition slot is inactive. It's actually only used for OTA updates. So when you get an update over the air, it downloads it onto the inactive partition, and then they just swap. That's why over the air updates take like 10 minutes versus half an hour like they used to. In my opinion, it's ridiculous too. If you were thinking that was ridiculous, but hey, it is what it is. It's not going to make it any more difficult. All right, so OmniROM is just about finished flashing. Steps 1, 2, 2 of 2. You're home free. And right after that, TWRP is going to reinstall itself. You have to reinstall TWRP after flashing any ROM if you want TWRP after you're done flashing your ROM. It will overwrite the boot partition, and the way they kind of have it now is that boot, recovery, and system are in a completely new way. I remember the Poco phone actually merges both recovery and system together. So that one was just a whole other shit show. But in this case, OnePlus does have the separate partition, thank God. But some devices actually merge the two, and it's really weird. Just make sure you flash your TWRP after every single ROM install if you wish to keep TWRP. Now, after we're done flashing that, we're going to go boot back to recovery. It says no OS installed. Are you sure you want to reboot? Yes, I am sure. All right. Now we're going to install it a second time. Omni, add more zips, TWRP. Remember, you did wipe a system partition, so you might have to flash it twice. Flashing it twice can't possibly hurt, especially if it was a clean flash, like we just performed over here. This flash had nothing. There was no system. If you tried to boot the system before flashing the stock firmware, you would go into either boot loops, you would go into a crash dump, or you would find yourself going into fast boot mode over and over again. Couldn't get past fast boot, which is actually a part of the boot partition. But again, it's for another video. So in any case, it's probably just better to flash it twice anyway, just to make sure that it didn't miss anything. Sometimes some weird shit happens. It can't hurt. It can only help. So just take the extra second. You've come this far. All right. Step 1, step 2, and then TWRP again. Remember, flash it after every single installation. Any custom firmware. And on the first boot, I guarantee you every single time it will boot properly without any boot loop. I guarantee you this. The only times I've ever had issues with installation are when I didn't follow these exact flashing procedures for the OnePlus 6, or when I did OTA updates. All right. That note, you are now unrooted. Sometimes that does mean that you were rooted and didn't even realize that. It says that all the way at the bottom right here. Be mindful of that. Sometimes you are still rooted, even if you have no system partition. Rooting patches the boot image, so keep that in mind. The boot image is rooted. That's what causes boot loops. Just saying. Reboot system, I guarantee you, it's going to start nice and fresh. And look at that. And what did I tell you? Starts up nice and clean. Alright, so that's going to conclude the video for flashing custom firmware onto your Android device. I hope this, with a special emphasis on the OnePlus X, of course, but it'll work for any AB partition, like the Google Pixel, for example. Alright, so yeah, that just about covers it. In the next video, I'll be going over flashing Magisk and Micro G, and hopefully starting you off on your journey outside of Google land.